I just returned from a bike ride from Heidelberg to Verona in Italy, which was about 1,100 kilometers in length and 12,000 meters in altitude across the Alps. It took me 9 days to get there, and then I actually couldn't really stop, so I added another tour to go from Verona to Lake Garda to meet my wife. Finally, she picked me up there, and then we spent also some vacation there. I wanted to raise money for an organization called CIS. So CIS gives away scholarships or study grants to young people between 16 and 20 years of age. I really much like that idea, because these in this age, this is the biggest adventure in your life, to stay abroad for 4 weeks, travel alone, don't take own money with you other than the study grant itself, write a thesis about a topic that you've pre-discussed with your mentor, keep a daily journal, and also finance report, and organize everything yourself. This is a lifelong memory that is created there, and a huge challenge with lots of setbacks and crises, and to overcome this and to master this. This is a huge learning, and in my firm belief, this is vastly important for everybody in essence. So I really much like that idea, and so my goal was to raise money for 20 scholarships, and so far I managed to raise money for 18. So a bit still to go, but I'm very positive that we will get there eventually. When I was 17 years old, and this is now 30 years ago, unfortunately, when I was 17 years old, I did my first CIS tour myself, and it took me to Scotland, and I studied fishery at the west coast of Scotland. The cheapest way to get there was by bike, so I went on a ship to Rotterdam, then on another ship to Hull on the east coast of the UK, and then went with my bike 1,700 kilometers across Scotland into the Highlands, to the islands on the west side. Lived with a fisherman for a week. He took me out to the sea on fish trawls, got to see different things, learned a heck of a lot, and then in essence drove back. So it was foremost a very sportive adventure, sleeping in a tent, getting wet every single day, and standing the traffic on the narrow roads of Scotland. That was a huge adventure for me. And at that time, these studies, they got one thing that you could get, you could win an award with them, which I did. And my award was a second trip, and that second trip took me to Iceland. And I wanted to stay on scientific whaling, because on one of my fish trawls in Scotland we had seen a whale, and I was so impressed. So I said, well, whaling, let's do this. And the problem is, the study grant at that time was 800 Deutschmarks, which is 400 euros, and there's just no way that you can get to Iceland with 400 euros, not to mention not to Iceland and back. So I had to find a way to get there for free, which I did. I called the Icelandic embassy so often, and told them about my project, and they said, well, we can't help you. And they called again, and eventually they said, well, here's a number of our general consul in Bremerhaven, call the guy. He will arrange a place on a ship for you, and please never call us again. And that worked for me. So eventually I ended up on a big trawler, 30 meters long, and I was seasick pretty much all the time for 3 days to get to Iceland, to Reykjavik. And once I was there, the next challenge started, because I was perceived as a security risk by immigration authorities, and I didn't have enough funds to pay my flight back. So at least not according to the policies. So I was about to be deported, and there were two other risk factors that played a role in this. The one was that a year before, two whaling ships had been sunk in the harbor of Reykjavik by a mine, or actually by a mine that was placed, obviously, by people from a radical activist organization, Sea Shepherd. That was number one. And number two, in this very year that I was traveling, the Pope, of all places, was visiting Iceland. And so there's this gentleman coming on a fish trawler, unofficially, with no money. And so it might well be that he's a security risk. So I was about to be deported. And my only rescue was an invitation letter that I had received from the Ministry of Fishery, but that invitation letter was at home. And these were the days before internet and WhatsApp and mobile phones and all of that. So I had to call home, and my parents were obviously going frantic by the idea that I was about to be deported. And so they had to fax this invitation letter to the authorities of Iceland. Now, at these days, you don't have a fax machine at home. You had to go to the postal office, and even dialing internationally was an adventure. But eventually the letter arrived and I was safe. And that was a great success. And well, then I had meanwhile developed a good relationship to the lady at the German embassy in Reykjavik. And now that the crisis was over and I had met her and she kind of liked me, so I said, well, I read about an article of the state president of Iceland about whaling, and I was wondering if I could have an interview with her. Her name was Vigdis Finnbogadottir. And the lady looked at me and smiled and said, I'm not sure what you young men have smoked, but I'm not sure that's good for you. But hey, let me give it a try. And so 3 days later I had my interview, literally. Including signing into the Golden Book of Reykjavik, or of Iceland, actually. And because of that interview and the questions I asked her, she was so intrigued that she made connections so that I could actually work on the whaling station. And I was one of the guys who was chopping down strips of whale meat and all of that. So it was ugly. It was terrible, but it was, I was there. I mean, I was really in the middle of the whaling process and the whaling industry, and really had first-hand impressions. I ate whale meat. I saw how the workers were doing their barbecues on the tubes, because everything in Iceland operates on steam, because it's a volcanic island and there's steam everywhere, or hot water everywhere. So everything is running on steam. So the tubes are very, very hot, and you can just grill or barbecue your meat there. So it was all these kinds of interesting and fascinating impressions, and I just learned so much about myself, about my own limitations, where I thought they would be, and where they actually were. So for me, this was very, very cool, and I didn't have the most easiest childhoods of all places. So for me, that built a huge degree my self-confidence and my self-image. So that's my personal story and my personal connection to this. Well, so I started off near Heidelberg, went down to Heidelberg, and then along the Rhine, up the Rhine, across Strasbourg in France, to Freiburg, and then over to Lake Constance. And in Überlingen I met people from CIS who were kind enough to receive me. And then I cycled together with a colleague and friend, Harry Morgenthaler, around Lake Constance. And then we went up the Rhine again to the tiny country Liechtenstein. And in Vaduz, from Vaduz, the next trip took me to Davos. In Davos, I was received by an official from the city who was kind enough to give me a jersey, a Viking jersey from Davos as a present, because they liked the idea. And then, so I continued from Davos. I went over the Fluela Pass, So this is with 2,400 something meters. That was a bit, I was a bit concerned because with luggage, your behavior or your performance in the mountains is a bit different than without luggage. But it was fine. It was all snow when I got up there, and it was really you go from green and warm up into the mountain where everything is still snow, and it was really, really cool. But then I was way ahead of my own schedule, so I added another tour, and I went across the Ofenpass, which is the next one, which is a very flat one, no big deal. And then I was in South Tyrol, Finchgau, the area is called. And then I saw, when talking to people mentioned, well, the Stilfzer Joch, this is the place to go, and this is the highest pass across the Alps. And it was not on my route, but I said, well, I want a day, I just want a day, so why don't we do something to get more money? And so I said, okay, so I'll add that to my list, and I went up the Stilfzer Joch, which is quite something. So first of all, you go 10 kilometers uphill without anything happening much, and then you come to the serpentine number 48, because there's 48 serpentines, and you start with the highest number, and you don't even see the top, and then 10 or so serpentines later, you realize that there's this mountain that is all covered with snow, and you're supposed to go there, and it's just so steep. And I was like, oh my god, this is going to be tough. And then eventually I saw the top, and I said, okay, at least I know where I'm going now, and I can get a feeling, and I felt it was somehow doable. So I worked very hard mentally, because actually that was a bit above my league, I have to say. But mentally, what I did is I cut the 48 serpentines into chunks, little chunks, and I tried to finish one chunk after the other chunk, and so eventually I made it, and I was extremely happy and proud that I made it. And then you go back downhill for 3/4 of an hour, pretty much, and it's like amazing. I did all this, and I did go up all the way, so it was really, really cool, and always impressive how much you can actually do when you focus yourself on that, and when you go on your own speed. I was never trying to impress anybody or be fast or be anything. I did my breaks and made sure my energy was good and my mood was good, and so eventually I got up. And then that was the toughest bit really, and then the rest was cycling down the river edge, which goes from the South Tyrol all the way down to Verona, and that was comparatively a piece of cake actually after that stuff that I had done. And then I was almost a little disappointed when I was in Verona and at the arena there, and it was all so great, but I didn't want to stop, and had somebody said, well, here's a bit of money for your project, why don't you cycle back home? And had I had the time, I probably would have done it, quite frankly, so I was really intrigued. And then a major TV station called and said, hey, we're a bit late to the game, we've heard about your story, and why don't you do it again? Maybe we can accompany you with a team from us. And obviously I like the idea, because you can raise more money probably for the good cause, for CIS. So that's my next thing, that's what I'm planning. Many things. It is such an intense way to travel. I sometimes was so touched by the beauty of nature, and you get, you peel your body armor, you take off your body armor, and you really I got connected to my emotions, and I was, sometimes my tears were rolling down my face when I was cycling through nature, which was just so incredibly beautiful. And coming from the Alps down to the valleys of South Tyrol, which is so much, with apple trees, and it's also green, and it looks just like God's garden. It's unbelievable, undescribable really, that feeling. So that was one big thing. And the other big thing is, I think it makes all the difference for what reasons you do something. So I always like challenges. I think everybody who knows me will agree. But I think what has changed over the years, and that probably has to do with my work, is that I always tried. In the past, I always tried to do challenges, also to show everybody how great I am. But in reality, what I wanted to do is to convince me that I'm actually okay, and that I'm not an imposter, and that I'm not a failure. And so I was doing it, but I was doing it to show off, and I was doing it to hide a fear or concern that I had. And I think over the years that has changed slightly. I wouldn't say that I'm totally off that, but I think the majority today is that I connect what I do to what makes sense, so to my purpose, to my meaning, and that makes such a big difference. I mean, for me, the biggest difference is that I don't need to tell people about the story or what I've learned. I mean, it's not that I need to brag or anything, but it's a silent feeling inside of me, like a feeling of calmness when I think back, and a very round sort of feeling, which I didn't have in the past. It was always this: I need to do more. And that's an engine that's inside of me, but it was quite a learning for me that what a difference it makes if what you're doing is really connected to your purpose. So this was a team thing, and there were so many people that were absolutely important to make this happen. So I hope I don't forget anybody, but so first of all, there were my sponsors. So these are the companies that were sponsoring me. So there was Bearing Point, which is a consultancy. Then there was Haufe, which is a publishing company. WHU, which is a business school. Relevant is a management consultancy. Executive Coaching Connections are our friends from in the coaching market and also in the resilience market. And obviously my company, Leadership Choices, who was the biggest sponsor behind all of that. And then there is the Association for Organizational Resilience, and even Friedenshof was part of that, and Morgenthaler Consulting, and Harry Morgenthaler was even part of the tour. So thank you all for your donations that made the entire thing possible. There were many, many more donors, individual ones, private ones, institutional ones, and sometimes you're really amazed how much people are willing to give for something that impresses them or that they would like to support. So I'm really, really thankful for that. And so I got more than 70 individual donors, which is great. Dietmar Schmidt was the photographer and also the person who was editing a lot of my photo material. So he made it look really crisp, and it has this special look that only the Dietmar Schmidt images have. Then Michel Ort was accompanying me on day 2 and 3, took also a lot of pictures. Maria Xenia Hart was one of the also co-cyclists who joined me on day 3, I believe, on my way to Freiburg. And she was writing for the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which was pretty cool, very good article, I liked it. And it was her first interview during a cycling trip, which was a new experience for all of us. Obviously, I would like to thank CIS also for supporting this initiative and for giving it all sorts of media attention and doing the best they could in every corner in giving me the support for the project. I mentioned Harry, who was my windbreaker when there was a lot of wind and rain. We had 6 hours of constant rain, heavy rain, and it was really from a moral standpoint, very important to have him with me. What else? So Susanne Schleier helped me acquiring sponsors. Nadesh was helping me with organizing the hotels. Patricia, they were writing. Jochen and Lea Maas from a media agency were also supporting with the media contacts. And there were many, many more that supported me in that, and it was a great thing. And as I said, so the next tour is in planning. It will happen in 2018, and it will lead me from Heidelberg to Montpellier. Montpellier is the partner city of Heidelberg in France. It will be about 1,500 kilometers and about 15,000 meters in altitude this time, going again across France, across Switzerland, across Italy, across Monaco, and obviously across France again. And so yeah, I'm looking very much forward to this and the entire planning process, and talking to people, acquiring media contacts, acquiring companies. So whenever you hear something, or you hear about this project and want to help, please reach out. This is a big thing that can never be achieved alone. So I'm definitely grateful for everybody who is offering any sort of support, be it joining up for a day, to be part of the trip, be it financially, be it through accommodation, even be it through a sport massage, because I can tell you, your legs become very, very stiff over the days of cycling. 150 kilometers a day. That's I'm not a professional sportsman or anything. I'm just a regular businessman who does a little bit of sport, and so that kind of support is definitely needed. So yeah, with that, I just wanted to share that with everybody who was contributing, and thank you all. And I guess you will hear more from you in the time to come. Take care.